You were not meant to be a slave to the grind. You were not meant to trade your life force for money. You can escape gravity. You can unlock your life. You got this. Let's go.
Hello and welcome to Unlock Your Life. I'm your host, Jennings Smith. Today, I've got a story for you. So, you may or may not be familiar with this story. It's actually out of the Bible, Matthew 14. And in the story, Jesus is teaching the crowds, right? The crowds are by this lake, and he's preached all day, and his disciples are tired. He's tired. So he tells the 12 of them, all right, get into this boat, get away from the crowds, go across the lake, and I'll meet up with you later. Right? So the 12 disciples get in the boat and shove off. Right? And then Matthew says that Jesus went off and went up the mountain to pray. Well, a little while later, it's nighttime, right? And a storm has arisen on this lake. There's waves, there's lightning, there's thunder. And I'm not talking about this boat is a Disney cruise ship. This boat is probably an open type rowboat. Maybe it's got a sail, but this thing is meant for calm seas in sunny weather. Now it's night, a storm's blown up, and these guys are out in the middle of the lake with a very, very real chance of drowning, of dying, right? So it's a serious situation. And they're looking out and they see what looks to be a ghost. And you may know this story. It's a famous story, but Jesus is walking on water, except he's so far away they don't know who or what this is. And some are saying, oh, it's a ghost. Peter recognizes and says, well, that's Jesus. And he says, Lord, is that you? And Jesus says, yes. He says, Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come out to you. And Jesus says, come. So Peter gets out of the boat and walks on water. Jesus is walking across the water, which is the miracle, right? He's walking across the water to the boat, and Peter gets out of the boat and is able to stand on the water and walks towards Jesus. And if you know the story, you know what happens next. It says that he took his eyes off Jesus. He starts looking at the wind and the waves and the storm, and maybe his logical brain is now kicking in and he's like, holy cow, I'm walking on water. This can't be. This shouldn't be. I'm about to die. I don't know what I was thinking. And as soon as this happens, he starts to sink. And he starts to sink and plunge into the sea, maybe to his death. I don't know if he can swim or not. The Bible doesn't tell us. But what does tell us that Jesus walked over to him, reached out his hand, grabbed him, and boom, immediately he pulls up and stands back on the water, and they walk across the water back to the boat. And Jesus reprimands Peter a little bit and says, hey, why didn't you have faith? You've seen me do all these miracles. You know I'm the Son of God. Why did you have faith? And the typical message that's preached on this is, well, Peter had a lack of faith, right? He took his eyes off Christ. He looked down and the waves overtook him, and it's all focused on Peter. But I heard a message at my church last week or 2 weeks ago, and they had a very different perspective on this story. And I'm going to get to that in a minute if you stick with me, because I promise you probably have not thought of this story in this way, and it's going to change the way that you're thinking about things. So before I get to that, let me tell you another story. Santee Circle, I've talked about it on my podcast a little bit before. This is a self-storage deal that we bought about 2.5 years ago. And I located this deal. It was an older seller. He was done doing it. He wanted to retire, spend more time with his wife and family. And it was about 100 self-storage units, about 100 boat and RV parking spaces. Well, 75, but we could add another 25. And he was bringing in about $9,500 a month, and he wanted $1.2 million for it. And at $1.2 million, I could bring my down payment of $300,000, and the deal would cash flow a little bit. I could pay my debt and it would cash flow a little bit, but it wasn't a great deal. But it was still a decent deal. So I did my math, and essentially for this to be a great deal, for me to go out and find investors to invest in this deal and syndicate it or do a joint venture, I'd have to get the property probably around 900 to 950,000. And this guy wanted 1.2 million. And there were other buyers, like larger players in the self-storage space, that would be willing to pay that price. And so I was pretty much going to lose the deal if I couldn't make the deal work at 1.2 million. And so I was at a little bit of a crisis of faith there, right? Because it didn't really look like there was much of a deal there. Even though I'd found an off-market deal, it was kind of near my town. It looked like it had potential. The numbers didn't really work. And so I asked this guy to take a chance on me. I said, will you essentially partner with me and bring the $300,000 down payment? So I'll get a loan and I'll give you 900 grand at closing, but the last 300 grand, I need you to partner with me on that and let me make payments with you for 3 years, right? I'm going to make payments at, I think we negotiated 4% interest on a 30-year amortization schedule. So payments of about $1,600, $1,700 a month for 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, I will pay you a balloon payment of the balance, right? And he agreed to that because he got to know me. He wanted my price. He's getting a good, decent amount of chunk of money up front. And he felt confident that I could implement the plan and make it be worth enough to, either sell it for more or refinance it and get him his last $300,000. And you probably heard this story, but this story has now come full cycle, right? And so what happened was we did do that deal. We closed and we're bringing in $9,500 a month. My debt payment, my expenses, and my payment to the guy, they were about $9,500 a month. So there was very little wiggle room. And I felt like we were going to be able to add more boat and parking spaces. We were going to be able to increase rents a little bit. We were able to run it a little bit more efficiently than he had and make money. And so we got into it and we hired a management company that was more versed in multifamily. They thought they could take it on. And long story short, it did not work out well. They didn't have the right software setups. They weren't familiar with the intricacies of self-storage. And it's very different than multifamily. There's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of differences. And my sister, Crystal, you may know her from the deal room or from the My First Million group, but my sister, Crystal, was a small partner in that deal to sort of help me to keep it on track. I think she owned, 10% or something of the deal. And Yaden and I owned the rest because we didn't have any investors. So after about, 6 months, this deal was now in way worse shape than it had been before. The gate was constantly breaking. People were leaving. They weren't getting the customer service. The parking spots weren't correctly labeled and laid out. And this thing was just going from 9,500 to, I think, went all the way down to like 6,500. So now, not only are we going the wrong way, we are losing $3,000 a month. We're not even covering our note. We're not covering our payment to the guy. I mean, we're still paying it out of our pocket, but that's not the way that you want the deal to go. And so we decided to make a management change, and we decided to take the management in-house and have Crystal take the lead on this. And Crystal had to have faith in that situation. Just like I had to have faith to ask the guy, hey, will you do a creative deal with me? He had to have faith in me that I'm going to do what I say and I'm going to pay him back. And Crystal had to step out in faith and do this because she had not run a self-storage facility. She'd done research, she'd done a little bit here and there, but she had not been in the trenches of actually operating one. And so she took over the management. We redid the software. We got the gate working. We communicated with the tenants. We got the people that were there happy. We got the boat spots laid out. We got them filled up. She started running Facebook ads. She started running marketing specials, move-in specials. And little by little, we scraped back. And I think within 4 or 5 months, we were back at $9,500, $10,000 a month. And we've owned this deal for 2.5 years. So you fast forward to where we are today, we're at around $15,000, $16,000 a month in gross collections, which is great. That was our plan. That's what we wanted to do in the beginning. I think we wanted to hit 15,000. So we're above that now. And so we've been paying the guy faithfully all along. We take the deal back to the bank and we have a good loan. So we go back to the same bank and we say, hey, will you just give us another $300,000 supplement loan? We don't want to refinance the whole property because we're in a good situation here. Will you give us a little supplement loan of 300 grand at a higher interest rate because rates are up right now? And they said, well, let's appraise it. So they appraised the property and the appraisal came back at a valuation of 2.2 million. So if you remember from the beginning of the story, we paid 1.2 million and now it's appraised at 2.2 million. Now, I don't know if we could sell it for that, but it's a good number and it's definitely worth more than we paid. And so the bank said, well, yeah, I mean, you only owed 900 grand on this. We'll be happy to bump the leverage up to 1.2 because you're still at like 50 something percent leverage. So they gave us that, they approved that, and we looked up the amortization schedule with the seller. There was about a $287,000 balance. We'd paid down a little bit of principal, and we went to the bank. We got a certified check printed out. We closed the refinance, and we handed the guy the check. We went to his house and shook his hand, thanked him for having faith in us, right? Thanked him for believing in our dream and our project. And I was thanking Crystal because she's the one that saved our bank kid, pulled me out of the fire and did the work. And we did focus. We did hustle. I mean, I was out there laying out the parking spots. I was out there doing whatever it took to get this thing back on track. And so it was a really, really cool win to get this thing. Our new additional payment is about $2,000 a month. So really the cash flow only changed by $300 or $400. It's now a blessing property. It's worth $1 million more than we paid for it. It's cash flowing, $3,000 to $5,000 a month fairly consistently, and it's a great deal. So what does this have to do with Peter falling into the lake? So when that story is told, there's a major piece that's missing. Everyone focuses on Peter and his lack of faith and how he looked down and he looked at the waves and he freaked out. What about the other 11 guys that never even got out of the boat? Peter was the only one that said, Lord, is that you? Peter was the only one that said, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you. Peter is the only guy that got out of that boat and attempted to walk across water. I don't know about you, but I've never attempted that. And the other 11, they're not mentioned in the story. They sat in the boat. The boat is very, very comfortable. The boat feels safe. Outside of the boat, there's wind, there's water, there's rain, there's drowning, there's unknowns, there's bankruptcy, there's financial stresses, there's financial pressures, there's personal growth, there's getting outside of your comfort zone, there's doing things that you haven't ever done before, and frankly, you don't really want to do them. That's all outside of the boat. And what I find is, for a very, very, very long time, I was in the boat. And in certain pieces of my life and aspects of my life, I still am in the boat. And it's only when I'm willing to step out of the boat in faith that, hey, God is calling me to something bigger. God is calling me to something greater. Not in my own strength, not in my own ambition, not in my own dreams and goals and my own glory. He's calling me to do something that is going to impact his kingdom. It's going to impact the world. It's going to impact other people. It's going to be a blessing, right? Because when Crystal took that property over, she now became the majority owner of that property, right? She is now, increased her net worth quite a bit, and she needed it, right? And I think about the other stories of people in our group, in the deal room that we mentor, that we have relationships with, that have changed the outcome of what they're doing. And they're not doing it just for them. And hopefully they're not doing it for themselves at all. They're doing it for something bigger. They're doing it for their families. They're doing it for their future. They're doing it to be prepared when someone else in their life needs help. They're doing it so they have a skill where they can partner with other people and help them too, right? And when we get out everything that we want, the whole world is outside of that boat if we're willing to step outside of that. So my challenge to you is, what comfort are you called to give up? What area of your life are you sitting in the boat? And I'm not even talking about real estate here. Are you called to do more for your family? Are you called to do more for your church? Are you called to start a ministry to men or children or unwed mothers or whatever it is? What is God laying on your heart where it's scary, it's risky, it may not work, it may be embarrassing, it may be a failure. People aren't going to understand what you're doing or why you're doing that. And you like things kind of just the way you are, where you can control everything. But if you're in that boat, you're missing the boat. So my challenge to you is ask God for direction. Where would he have you grow? Where would he have you stretch? Where would he have you reach and step out in faith like Peter and not be one of the other 11 that are unmentioned that stayed stuck in the boat? All right, guys, have a great week and remember to unlock your life.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.